Good evening, everyone. I declare the agenda briefing forum of the 9th of December 2025 held at Council Chambers, Level 2, 388 Hayes Street, Subiaco, open at 5:30 p.m. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on and recognise their ongoing connection. Okay, it looks like we've got a full complement of elected members. That's 8 councillors and a mayor, so welcome to all of you and the CEO and your directors. Good evening to you also. Okay, as obviously no apologies, no leave of absences will be dealt with this evening. Are there any disclosures of interest tonight? Nope. Okay. No approved deputations. I don't have anything I need to announce this week. Let's move on to the officer reports, beginning with C1, Draft Amended Local Planning Policy 7.5. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Johnston. All right, if there's no questions on C1, we can move on to C2. There is a question on C1? Okay, councillor.
Thank you. Sorry, Mary, I'm just still getting my notes in order. I do have a question on the process that's for this item, that with the legal advice on matters. If it's disagreed by council, there's a section where it says that the mayor, the CEO, and in conjunction with the mayor will. Am I on the right item? Next one.
Yeah, you're asking about the item at C2.
Sorry.
So C1 is Planning Policy 7.5 relating to planning compliance. Do we have any questions on C1? I'm not sure that we do. Okay, I think we can move on to C2. Yes, C2 relates to the draft council policy on the appointment of legal and external planning professionals for planning matters and local planning policy 7.4 revocation. Councillor Johnston, you've got a question on C2.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm wishing I could find it exactly where where it mentions it, but I was wondering, it doesn't outline what the process would be if in the situation where there was this disagreement, how the mayor would consult with councillors. Thank you.
Okay, well, look, why don't I get up the policy? That'll take a second.
If I may, it's in the attachments, I think on page...
Yeah, I know where it is, but I just don't have a printout of it. Okay, what's the question?
The question is regarding the clause that says that the mayor will liaise with councillors.
That's it. There. The CEO will consult with the mayor and councillors to understand the council.
And it's particularly, it was in the attachments. I noticed it with the appointment point C2, the mayor confirms that elected members are satisfied. And that's the specific part that I'm wondering how
Right,
that
okay.
what the process would be, how many councillors, how that would happen. Would that mean that it comes to a council meeting for a simple majority?
Well, no, I wouldn't have thought so, and I think it's business as usual that the CEO is the primary conduit of communications between elected members and staff, and it says in the Act that that primarily happens via the Mayor and the CEO. But look, C is pretty deliberate in that it refers to elected members as opposed to council. I don't think it's the policy intent that that in the rarest of circumstances where we're talking about going to SAT proceedings with city planning officers representing us, that that we would have to come back to council to work out who our advisors are. So it says the elected members. I don't think it's any more specific than that. That the mayor is confirming not that he or she thinks that that they are satisfied, but that the mayor is confirming that the elected members are satisfied that officers are well positioned to represent the council. So it's no more prescriptive than that. And look, if you wanted to, I suppose, prescribe how the consultation process would happen in relation to this particular item, I think we might be getting into some pretty interesting territory, because we'd probably want to be doing that for every single policy and every action and discussion that happens on every topic ever, because it's a necessary part of the mayoral role that you facilitate communication between elected members and staff. Any other questions? Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. And on point 7, involvement of third parties. This is the section that's going to be revoked. Is that correct?
Can we get the policy up again on the screen, please?
I'm just wondering if that's at point, if
That's the
that
old
clause 7 is going to be revoked. Will there be avenue for third parties to be able to lodge a submission to SAT if this is revoked?
Director Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So the third party provisions are actually in our policy that's going to be revoked. A policy can't deal with that in any sense because that's determined by the State Administrative Tribunal and their rules and regulations. So by policy referencing that, it has no purpose. By removing it from the policy, it has absolutely no bearing on the tribunal considering an application to intervene from a third party, noting that generally WA doesn't have third party appeal rights. So it's got no change in essence.
Thank you.
Questions on C2? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor. It's just that, well, in most cases, I think the policy says that if the council and staff reach different positions on a planning application in a decision, in most cases, external consultants will be appointed. It does appear as if there is room for an exception under point C. And I'm just wondering what would constitute an exception? Is there an example of, you know, why external consultants wouldn't be appointed?
The policy does specify some limited circumstances in which it might be appropriate to use staff in the tribunal. It's paragraph B. In instances where initial directions hearing occur in a short time frame, officers may, notwithstanding the starting presumption that externals are appointed, that they may represent the city at the tribunal on procedural matters and the making of programming orders as an interim measure. The thinking there, as I understand it, was that sometimes an initial directions hearing will get called at short notice, and all staff would be doing in that situation is making programming orders. And speaking on procedural points, to go any further than that, we're in the territory of paragraph C. We want to be satisfied that officers are well positioned to represent the city's position in the tribunal, and that external consultants are not necessary. The Director of Development Services may have some perspectives on the rare instances where that might be. Mr. Petrovsky, perhaps you can speak to that.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So the starting point is that whenever council makes a decision, its officers' duties under the Local Government Act to implement that position, and that's through the functions of the CEO and officers under the LG Act. Now, if there's a council decision which differs from an officer recommendation on a planning item, the officer is still required to advocate on behalf of the council in a mediation process, for example. So if we do discuss with the mayor and through elected members, whether that's in an EMIB or a workshop, to say, look, we understand what your intent was for this planning item or a condition for this planning item, we can still prosecute your recommendation on your decision on that, then, officers will be in a good position to do that, whether that's an approval with a condition that council has recommended, or even if it's a refusal, for example, if council had a particular issue with a, let's say, building height or overshadowing, for example, because the decision maker is always council, and that would always be coming back to council for a decision. So what we would do is work with the mayor and elected members to say, look, we understand your point and your reasons for this decision, and we will take that position as we are required to as the council's point for mediation. Any further decisions after that would still have to come back to council. Elected members would ordinarily be invited by the tribunal to attend, so they'll be there to be able to provide the issues from the elected members themselves as well. The conflict only ever arises if a matter goes to a full hearing and an officer's recommendation has been previously put to the public. Mediation is all confidential and all without prejudice, so there's never a conflict of interest arising through that.
I think I'll have to absorb that, thank you, Mayor.
I think we should.
I mean, I think we're asking about situations which are going to be the exception to the rule, so it's kind of hard to think of examples where we would be all satisfied that officers are well positioned to represent the council position and that we shouldn't be appointing external planning consultants, because the whole point of this policy is to set the starting presumption that external planning professionals will be appointed when a matter goes to the SAT after council has decided differently to a staff recommendation. So we're talking about rare situations which are probably hard to pinpoint at the moment, but the option would be there.
If I might, look, I agree, Mayor, it would be vanishingly small, the occasions on which it would arise. But this is a policy, that will be guiding the council for at least the next 5 years. So it's important to get it right.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMillan. Just for by way of example, if either of the two, which were reasonably contentious and most people would remember them, that were here at the time, if either of the two short stay accommodation issues had been taken to appeal, which they obviously could, and it was in both matters all councillors saw a different path than the staff recommendation. In that circumstance, had there been an appeal, if this is an appropriate question, would the staff have represented us, seeing there was such a division between the staff's opinion and council, or would that instance be something where third-party consultants would have been used, if that can be answered?
Well, I think the fact we're having this conversation suggests that in this hypothetical situation, the Mayor would have consulted with elected members such as yourself and others would have said, I'm not comfortable having staff representing us at a mediation or a hearing. The Mayor would have fed back the elected member feedback to the CEO, and as a result, paragraph C of the policy is not satisfied, and the default position remains that we use externals.
I appreciate that, and that's it's a better answer than I was expected to garner. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Burns.
Just also, perhaps for everybody's illumination, how many times have we even gone to SAT in the last 12 months? I mean, other than certain matters that we live in, but I mean, what's the quantum right now? I'd suggest in the current age we live in, it's almost zero. But if I could have that, just a bit of an answer, thanks.
Manager Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMillan. So SAT appeals from a council decision for the last 12 months is probably zero, and on planning matters, not building, and also I guess for staff matters, it's probably been zero as well.
Okay. Any other questions on C2? Right, I think we can move on to C3, the RFQ for computer and laptop replacements. Councillor Pine.
Thank you. Could I ask a couple of questions? The first one is, how many staff employed by the city for which laptops are required? I know that the documents suggest that we need 218 laptops.
Director Business Improvement.
So the question around the number of FTE off the top of my head, don't have that at my fingertips. But in terms of replacements, the team would have gone through and had a look at all the existing devices when they were last purchased to pick out the ones that were due for replacement now, which is how we've come up with the quantum that we have.
Perhaps if I can add, and it varies. So we do have, as staff turnover happens, we may replace a full-time employee with a couple of part-time employees, etc. And we would have a few available as spares as well. So, but that number is, they've done the analysis around that. So, but headcount and FTE can change because quite often there'll be times we do split a role into two or two different roles rather than one FTE, if that makes sense. But it's around that number.
Maybe you can take on notice to provide a bit more information ahead of the meeting next week. That would be helpful. I've got another one. Maybe for the benefit of the public, would you be able to summarise the scope of this proposal? I mean, it's almost $500,000 here. So just maybe if you could elaborate what is this proposal about, because there's not a lot of detail in the paper.
Director of Business Improvement.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So the proposal is to replace our existing devices that are due for replacement. That includes replacing desktop computers and also laptops. And then purchasing for the desktop computers that are changing from desktops to laptops, purchasing the required docking stations to go with them. The procurement's not covering the purchase of things like keyboards and mice, those types of things.
And just one final question. How do we know that we're getting value for money for this contract? I mean, I see that we're going to, the recommendation is to actually award to Dell Australia. There was another bidder. But how do we know that we're actually getting value money? Because it's not an insignificant amount of money for this contract.
Director Business Improvement.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So the cities use the state government's common use agreement to procure these items. The benefit of using that process is that the tenderers have already been through a pre-selection process, and the other advantage is that we get the buying power of the state government behind us as well, rather than us going as an individual organisation directly to procure these items.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The RFQ is to purchase devices in this instance, and I appreciate from what you've already said that that will transition most of the staff over to laptops, and only those staff whose roles more appropriate to have a desktop will have a desktop. Does that mean that next time we get to this point of replacing, we may have more options in terms of thinking about whether leasing is an option as opposed to buying? Is that something that we might look at in the future, picking up Councillor Pine's concerns?
Thank you, and through the Mayor. Absolutely. In my view, once you've got a stable fleet, that makes it much easier to compare apples with apples. It also makes it much easier to maintain your fleet going forward because you've got a consistent approach to the type of devices that you have. So, yep, gives us more options in my view.
Questions? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Member McMullen. Just out of curiosity, what are these things made of? Because as I look around at all the administrators' computers, they all look like they're losing paint on them, which I don't find with some other brands, and I'm not going to name anybody. But they're all just round the top of the edges and everything else. They're all just like showing the black underneath. You know, are they just spray painted? They look a bit dodgy to me. But then Dell is a Texas company and Texans are dodgy. So I'd spend enough time there for even worse than Australians. But they're just, yeah, I don't know. Kind of look at, they're just not, I don't know.
They appear to be plastic. I don't think we need a staff answer for that if you're happy. I'm a bit closer to the laptop than you are, Councillor Burns.
I mean, they're all just peeling. That's how old they are. And, okay, well, if I can carry on.
Sure.
And that sort of, I heard behind me that somebody said they're all sort of well worn and things. So, well, look, I understand end of life, and I also understand the speed at which computing is altering. But what I'd like to know, if somebody could tell me, as you see fit, Mayor McMullen, is kind of what's wrong with them as they are right now, as in they're too slow, they're not, you can't upgrade software because it's saying you don't have the processing speed. What makes them, in the most lay of terms, just tired and time that I gather hundreds of these are all going to hit the trash or something as the new ones come in. They'll be sent to the bottom of the river.
Director of Business Improvement, did you want to answer that or ask Manager Information Services to have a go?
I'll pass this one over to the Manager of Information Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So we have already encountered device battery issues, which have been reported by the staff due to age of the device as well. And the more outdated the device gets, it's hard to apply security updates, so we lose in the risk of cyber attacks as well in terms of the device age. So the sooner we replace it, the end of life devices, the better it is from a stability point of view and the usability point of view as well. Thank you.
Can I just add something? A bit of a history lesson for those that are impressed with Moore's law, but essentially it was around the time frame around chips, and that determined the time frame around software development. And the point that you make exactly is the older the PC, the slower it goes in terms of, because the software improves. So that's why generally that sort of 3-year time frame for replacement of hardware is sort of been kept pretty constant, probably since the 70s. And so it's about software development, chip development, working together. And now we have this added thing around how long batteries last as well, and the temperature associated with that. So, and noting that generally the desktop is of a higher spec because it hasn't been shrunk as well. So all those things go into how you change your fleet over and why it's sort of generally around this time. If you get too far behind, it's what I quite often get is through exit interviews and those types of things where individuals are complaining about the tools that we're giving them are not fit for purpose. But at the moment, because we sort of do this regular turnover, I don't have those complaints. In other words, the tools we got are fit for purpose.
Thank you. Okay, so if we establish, which probably would have been anybody's guess, that 3 years, okay, you know, I mean, 2 being too short and 5 being too long. So we'll just say 3. How would that affect Councillor O'Connor's question about leasing? Because how do you lease anything that's got a 3-year life? Arguably, you're not going to give it back at the end of 3 years, but I don't want it. They'd have to dispose of. So am I right in concluding that we're better off just buying them and then knowing it, and we just write them off because that's the end of them, you know what I mean? And arguably, I don't know. I think you get where I'm going.
CEO?
Yeah, look, I think you should always consider leasing options, and leasing a fleet for laptops, desktops, etc. Is not an unusual in that time frame. Usually where the leasing option turns to be favourable, because essentially that's just a financing component, so it depends on the interest rate and the time frame. But some organisations are clever in the way in which they recycle. So they may then well be able to get a better price in terms of whether they're putting these devices to another country or something like that. So it's just the competitive advantage of the leasing provider at the time, and whether or not they have, it's a bit like gym equipment, same sort of thing. You'll probably get a better price on gym equipment if the actual organisation that does that can then get a better price at the end when you're changing that over. So it's just an evaluation, changes over time. Sometimes it's beneficial, sometimes the numbers don't stack up.
Councillor Fife.
Yes, through you, Mayor. What's going to happen to all the old computers? Are they going to be donated to somebody? What happens with them?
Director Business Improvement.
Thank you. And through the Mayor, the old devices, we dispose of them through an e-waste program. So it's a secure program in which they wipe all the devices for us and then give us certificates back at the end to confirm that they've been securely cleaned.
Just to follow up, I know I did a lot of work up in East Timor a few years ago, and some of those developing countries were extremely grateful for second-hand devices like this. I wonder if we might investigate whether or not there's a more profitable or what would you call it, philanthropic way to dispose of them than through an e-waste.
Director?
Thank you. Through the Mayor. The company that we use actually do recycle. the equipment. In terms of the city donating these assets, it is something that we could look into if council so chooses to. However, we would need to be mindful that many of these devices are already experiencing issues around battery life, etc. Given the age, they can pose a security risk. And then lastly, these devices would be out of warranty by the time we would pass them on as well. So mindful that handing this across to a not-for-profit, they would then have to think about warranties, repairs, efficiencies of those devices as well.
Councillor Burns.
Just the response has generated a new question, if you don't mind, Mayor McMullen. Could we, or I, have some information on exactly, in light of what you said, and I'm not criticising it, exactly what this e-waste company does in washing them? I mean, washing a computer is not exactly rocket science, but so we're giving to somebody to wash it, and then they get to do whatever they like with it, as opposed to us washing it. And if we want to give them to anybody we like, I don't think the receiver, in what Councillor Fife was alluding to, really gives a hoot if the battery's dying or whatever else. Okay, I think if it lasts one day, they're probably happy, and if it lasts longer, and I think a lot of people can extract some life. So I'd just like to know what this e-waste companies does that we couldn't do, or we couldn't give some yo-ho, $10 to do. So that's all I'd like, if I could have that answered before we decide this. Thank you.
Okay, that information will be provided after tonight. Councillor Pine.
Going back to the cost effectiveness, could you clarify, essentially the proposal is to replace essentially all the devices of all the staffs in one go, or do you have a program that takes many months, etc., or many years? What's the approach? And the reason for that is really around standardization. You mentioned that you're looking to standardize all the machines. Now, I'm used to working in a big company where you've got a rolling program to refresh machines, and essentially, if you're keeping up with technology, standardization of the machine itself goes out to the window. So are you actually getting the best product essentially by buying 218 machines that are all the same, as opposed to buying just what you need and actually buying the best machine that you need for the job, forgetting about that standardization that you've specified to standardize against the docking machines, machine that you've got, essentially, the docking station, sorry. It's just that you're constraining yourself potentially to the machines that you're actually buying, and you may not be buying the best machines, essentially, and at the best price.
Business improvement. I think we've got the question, Director.
Thank you, through the Mayor. The devices are based on the operational need for the positions. So contained in this purchase would be, I think, about 36 high-spec devices. The devices we have usually a 3 to 4 year replacement program, so we replace the majority of the fleet. When I say majority, there's probably only a handful that generally don't get replaced. So if there's a handful that we've recently purchased because there's been damaged laptops or new positions or the like, and then the other ones that would be done out of sync would be the highest spec one, which would be the PC that's used for our videographer, because of the technical specifications of that device is very unique compared to all of the other devices that we're purchasing. Otherwise, we replace the entire fleet every 3 to 4 years is the replacement cycle.
Councillor Fife.
Just having replaced my 12-year-old laptop, I think if we could find a way to donate them, I'm pretty sure we'll get more than a day or a week's use out of them. They do last a lot longer than 3 years, in my experience.
We'll think about that during the week. Are there any more questions? No, I don't think so. I think we're finished with C3. Thank you, councillors. So that brings us to C4, the annual report and audited annual financial statements for 24-25. Any questions on C4? We have covered a lot of material by email already, but if there's any questions that would benefit from an airing tonight, there's still a chance. Councillor Johnston.
Just trying to find whether my question was C4 or C5, but I think it's C4 in the financial report. The 24-25 income and expenditure summary, loss on asset disposals of 365,000. I was just querying what that was for. Thank you.
Director of Corporate Services.
Sure, I think I answered that earlier today, but I might hand over to the Manager of Financial Services who will have it fresh in her head.
Thank you, and through you, the Mayor. The two primary disposals of assets that are making up that bit over $300,000 were two assets within the infrastructure asset classes of other infrastructure. So there were two assets that were capitalised in the prior financial year that shouldn't have been, being street trees and ephemeral art. In this financial year, we've now disposed of them. In addition to that, there is your standard changeover of our fleet vehicles. There's a little bit of a loss there, and 8 Rupert Street, a minor amount. But that has been included in an email that Emma has sent out today with a little bit more of a breakdown, I believe.
Thank you, and I haven't been able to get to the emails today, so apologies for that. I also have a question on depreciation. Am I still on the right agenda number? Thank you. I was just querying, I think it mentions the depreciation for last year's budget and the actual for this year. We were $1 million over the actual for last year compared to the budgeted amount and the actual for this year. So I just wondered, where we're looking at budgeting for next year on that depreciation amount, given we were 1 million below on the budget from the previous year's actual.
Director.
Yep, so I'll provide a quick summary. So basically you'll see there in the agenda report, there's a little bit of information around that. So basically it's around the accelerated depreciation of 241 Rockaby Road. So, when there's an intention by way of, prior council resolutions, for example, to potentially dispose of an asset, then the auditors take that into account in terms of how you're required to treat depreciation of that asset. So that's a one-off type of factor that you wouldn't expect to carry through long into the future. I might hand over to the Manager of Financial Services in case there's any further clarification or...
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. As Director of Corporate Services has stated, a majority of that variance is due to the accelerated depreciation on 241 Rockaby Road. The other part of that sum that makes up the additional variance is by the time that we get our building revaluations done at the end of each financial year, we've already set our budget for the next financial year. So there's just a timing gap in that, but it is something that we do review at mid-year budget review and increase that depreciation up. Just in the annual financial statements, we have to have our comparative on the adopted budget, not the mid-year review budget.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. Thank you. The other query I had was around the over 20% increase in material and contracts from 24 to 25, and what was that primarily due to?
Is this another one for the manager?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. That one I'm happy to take on notice for a little bit more information around some specific projects that we have done in this financial year compared to the previous financial year. But one part of that calculation is the change in how we've done our overhead recoveries from operating into capital. So for where staff have spent time on capital projects, normally that cost is recovered from that section in your operating activities down into your investing activities. In prior financial years, this has been accounted for within materials and contracts, whereas it should be within employee costs. That's been a change in this financial year. It's about 1.5 million.
Sorry, I do have one more. I did see one email answer come through to one of my questions earlier today, but I have got a follow-up question to that. It was I was questioning the property, plant and equipment sale of 17 million versus, which I didn't have in my question, but versus the next line item, the proceeds from sale of investment properties of 19 million. Thank you.
We'll have an answer from the manager then. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So it's in the statement of cash flows statement. So your sale of property, plant and equipment relates to 2 Opham Street and 8 Rupert, whereas your investment property is 100 Cusham out in Kewdale. So the 2 different lines are because they were under 2 different asset classes. So the buildings that are for investments are classed within our financial statements as investment properties, whereas the buildings that are for civic or social use are classed as property, plant and equipment. So there need to be 2 lines in the statements.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor O'Connor.
Possibly, I was just seeing if I could find the point. No, I won't bother.
Okay, anyone else? Final opportunity. Right, I think that is C4 done. C5 is not ready for discussion this evening, but that'll be the financial statements and reports for the month ending 30th of November. That's going to be a late report going straight to the OCM. I don't think there's going to be any confidential items next week. Well, there's not at this stage. And look, that brings us to the end of the briefing. So, is it about the agenda? Pretty much. I mean, either it is or it isn't.
Well, it's just that, just because we were just talking about the last item, and I'm not questioning that item, but I just draw the staff's attention to Brookfield and the Singaporean sovereign wealth fund acquisition of national storage, which directly relates to our business plan at Harborne Street. They just have offered $4.5 billion for national storage, which across Australia and New Zealand has 291 sites, some owned and some leased, and how that would particularly value each property. But I think it's worth noting that they're currently in a 14-day speed due diligence before they push the button to acquire national storage. Just for everybody's knowledge. Thanks.
Right.
It does relate to us. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Johnston, we're going back to one of the agenda items, are we?
Yes, thank you. It's just I'm just reading the response to my emailed questions earlier today, and I've got a follow up on the long service leave. And in the response, it talks about.
Okay, we're back on C4.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, annual report and audited financial statements.
Yep. Provision for long service leave. And I've just queried, so does that carry through with them when they move local government, does it?
Director Corporate Services.
Yeah, that's correct. So in relation to the long service leave regulations, that's absolutely right, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm almost certain we're at the end of the agenda now, so I'll declare the agenda briefing forum closed at 6:14 p.m. Thank you, councillors, for your diligence and your questions, and thank you, staff, for your advice.